So taxes versus merchants. Which one comes out ahead? And in what scenario should you use either of them? For the beginning player, it is often disheartening to see them attempt to use taxes to generate revenue in the early game. The problem with this approach is the fact that they are significantly reducing their passive honor when they increase their tax rate. So while you may be getting a lot of honor for having a very high popularity at little cost, you will not be making much gold when you offset that with taxes. It's a trap that I've seen many newer players fall into. They think that the idea is to get your village set up so you can tax your peasants. Really, there is really no way to justify taxing if you are an active player. If you are a farmer who really doesn't have time or the will to really commit to selling anything at your market, I suppose it is a viable alternative, although it's a very poor one. And the reason it's a very poor one is because, once again, you're trading off the positive honor generation that you could be making, and also you are removing the Peasant Modifier. Now, how the Peasant Modifier works is there's a timer that counts down in your village, and every time it reaches 0, more peasants arrive. Now, depending upon how high your popularity is, you'll have up to -5 peasants arriving each time the timer runs down. You reduce that popularity, that peasant bonus disappears very quickly, especially with taxes. This is why a lot of professional fighters will often, in later stages of the game, turn their taxes up only at night after they've logged off. And then when they come back in the morning, they turn their taxes back down to increase that peasant multiplier again, so that way they can continue to recruit armies very quickly. Another argument that you might hear levied against the merchant route is the fact that it requires a bit more research to actually be able to use it effectively. Now, when you first start off, merchants are very slow when you first research them, and it takes about 10 points into transportation to speed them up all the way and make them really viable throughout the game. If you do not have the 10 points in transportation, times are going to be atrocious. You're going to only probably trade with your local parish, as it's the nearest capital, and it is the only one with a fixed travel time compared to the other capitals surrounding you. Your parish has a fixed travel time between your village and it, regardless of how far you are from that parish capital. So yeah, having to put an additional 10 research points into transportation to make merchants good might on the surface seem to be quite an investment. But if you look at it this way, the fact that you are taxing instead of selling results in you not generating as much passive honor, and this means that you're not going to be ranking up as quickly, therefore fewer research points. If you invest in merchants, instead of taxes, you'll be gaining all that additional passive honor, you'll be ranking up faster, and therefore you'll have more research points. I understand this is a little bit of a catch-22, and if you set yourself up poorly in the beginning of the game, where you sort of completely ignored merchants, it can be a little bit more difficult to get into the ebb and flow of it. But there is never a point, I would say, that it's too late to research merchants, because sooner or later, regardless of your approach, you're going to need merchants. So the sooner you get into it, I believe, the better. Another argument that someone could bring against merchants is, well, I am not using passive honor to rank up, I'm using banquets. Well, what are you going to do after you get your second village? Because once you have 2 villages, you're going to be producing an additional banquet good type, and you're going to need merchants to transfer it between your villages. If your villages are not right next to each other, you're going to have to invest into transportation. I know a lot of people like to place their second village close to their first one. Okay, what about the third village? Again, you're going to put them all in the same parish. What about your upteenth village? Eventually they're all not going to fit in that small area, and it is really not a good strategy in the long run when it comes to politics. If your area gets into a war, it is a bad idea to sort of put all your eggs in one basket. So sooner or later, you're going to have to research transportation for merchants anyway. It is better, I believe, to get it researched early on. For me, I researched it in the second week, going on the third week, and by that time, I had the rank required to start trading outside of my county, so having those faster merchant times is helping me get a better price at foreign markets around my county. Just a little recap. Taxes are generated depending upon the number of peasants you have in your village. Passive honor is generated depending upon the honor multiplier buildings you have in your village multiplied by the popularity. So lower popularity means lower passive honor overall. And the only really recommended method of taxation, it comes much later in the game when you've already reached the rank you desire to remain at for the rest of pretty much the world or that age, and you either don't have the time or are unwilling to invest the time in trading, because trading is always going to make you more gold than taxation is. So taxation is sort of a farmer's game. If you are just basically letting your villages idle, it can be helpful to increase your tax rate so that way you have some positive gold flow. You're actually making gold as opposed to running yourself into a rut. But ultimately, merchants will beat out taxes in just about any scenario you compare the two in.
Stronghold Kingdoms. The battle has just begun.